Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, comedy on Power Talk, streaming worldwide, wherever you are in this beautiful world. Hope you're having a great day. Thanks for tuning in, and what an honor it is to bring in a cat who is still trying to paint on his palette. He's got a lot of creativity inside of him, a lot of soul, and it's really fascinating in this time to how people, especially musicians, can cultivate that soul when they are not on the bandstand making love with their peers. And, it's something that needs to be explored. And my show has become a reliquary for the multidimensional self, so might as well get into it. Jason Soda, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thanks for having me, Jake. How are you doing?
I'm good, brother. It's good to hear your voice, man. I wanted to ask you if you've done any Zoom concerts, and if so, what is the feeling like? There's an African element to it because there's no clapping in between songs. You don't know, right? Like you don't know. It's just sort of like. Are you able to reach a place or begin to reach a place of spirituality if you've done the Zoom concerts?
I can't tell you. I have not done any Zoom concerts. The idea, it's awkward enough sometimes. You take the applause element out of it. And
yeah.
That can be really difficult. I've seen some people do it, and it's great. More power to them. But I haven't gotten into that. I'm kind of taking advantage of the situation and trying to coast and just taking a little breather, which is really nice, and little things here and there. But as far as putting on any performances, I haven't been doing that lately.
If the breather lasts 24 months. That's okay. Being serious, because I'm just going to read you this. I got a wonderful, badass blues singer up in the Denver area, Cass Clayton. She sent me an invitation to they're playing Dazzle, which is a jazz club in Denver, her band. And I just want to read you this and then, see what, because it's interesting to hear you say the breather's really nice. In the sense that, musicians in general are raking and scraping for everything they can get.
Mm-hmm. I
just want to read you this. This is from the club. Now, again, this is a jazz club. Denver's kind of a hip place, but it says this: attendees must, capital letters, wear a face mask when not consuming food. We encourage you to arrive 30 to 60 minutes early for the first dinner show to consume food, then resume wearing the mask. Customers must spend a minimum of $30 for the 7 p.m. show and $20 minimum for the second show at 8:45 if you choose to stay. Tickets must be pre-purchased to allow the restaurant to set up COVID style. Table size is limited to 6 people. All patrons waiting to get in must stand 6 feet apart. Walking up tickets are only sold if there is availability and will be the last to be seated. There is no dancing. Customers may not congregate for any reason inside the venue. Customers need to stay with their parties. I am not a conspiracy theorist. I know the virus is real. It took one of my dear spirit brothers in Tucson. I'm not saying that. But have you, or do you even, have you surrendered to the idea of transformation in music, or are you optimistic that you're going to be able to get back on the bandstand?
That's a really good question. Obviously, I think we've all been thinking that. As far as getting back, music is a public thing, even though, also at the same time, it's totally not. It's a private experience as well, having records and streaming services and whatnot. But as far as, when you go out and you play, it sounds pretty horrible if everybody has to, it just doesn't seem like it's a comfortable situation where you can try to transcend, when you have all these you have to stand here and you can't stand here and you have to wear your thing and they only allow this many people in here and da da da.
Dude, I'm gonna get arrested, man. I would get arrested. I mean, for dancing, dude. I mean, it seems. I mean, if that's the conditions, then why even have live? I mean, that to me is stifling. I mean,
I don't know why you would do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't. I mean,
but here's the thing, Soda. Let me ask you this, and just honestly, like you said it yourself, like the Zoom concert thing. It's awkward because there's no applause, right? In this society, in Western culture, we've been trained to sit, stare, maybe dance at someone's facility or a song, and then clap at the end of a tune, right? So I mean, that's kind of antithetical to spiritual music to begin with. You said that, so that's kind of what we've been trained about. But the other thing is, as a society, again, I mean, I'm 42. You're probably, around the similar generation or whatever. But it's like the significance of music in our culture. At the pop level, it's made for multitasking. It's made for pacification. It's made for sitting and staring at somebody's facility, whether they're wanking it or not. It's not about letting the body dance. So is this actually, outside of our aesthetic? I know what you're talking about, but is that what music actually was kind of at a certain superficial level already becoming?
Man, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I kind of want to take it back and say that, you don't, need to have applause in order to perform something for somebody but, we know what, I don't even know how to answer that.
No, you know what? Listen, welcome to the Jake Feinberg show. I mean, this is like I'm burnt. I mean, like as a musician, the only way you can make money as a musician in today's world, obviously, if you wear different hats, you can make money other ways, as production, people, things like that. But,
sure.
I mean, the days of Joni Mitchell and Bob Dylan, sitting in their cabins writing insane songs and selling millions of records and then going on tour and, the record company writes off a $20,000 loss because the record's made so much money, that's gone, right? So the only way for musicians, authentic creatives like yourself, to really get ahead or even tread water is by touring. And so, my
role has changed a little bit.
Can you explain how it's changed? Because you seem very relaxed about the whole thing.
Well, this is why, I toured for many years and played in different bands and totally enjoy it, and I still enjoy it. I haven't toured for maybe a year and change. I mean, when I had quit a band that I was in for a long time back in 2012.
What was the name of that band?
Came home, Everest.
Everest, yeah.
We were sort of managed by Elliot Roberts at the time, and we were signed to Neil Young's Vapor Records, and then upstream to Warner Brothers, and then on ATO, and then at the end of that tenure, I engineer, producer, player role for the last, 7 years, pretty much full time. So, I get all the touring musicians coming in here, but, I've just been working in the studio and with the other bands that I've been playing with as well, locally, and maybe a couple of gigs here and there out of town. But the majority of it has been studio work. So, luckily, there's nobody applauding in the studio, not all the time at least. So, the studio is a nice place, and nothing has really changed other than, it got slow, and then, but
no, but let me ask you though. I mean, like, are you? There's just two real simple questions I have about production from Jason Soda's point of view. Like, I know that it's not the cost efficient way to do things, but I mean, I just sent you a couple of interviews. I've done 2,000 interviews, and I mean, I've talked to all the cats, and it's like, number one, before COVID, were you someone who believed in at least having most of the band in to hit at the same time to record? And number two, what is your feeling about miking techniques? Because I have a really hard time listening to modern music because everything is mic'd. So there's no leakage and there's no
Right.
space. And so I wanted to ask you, those two things, those aesthetics from your point of view.
Those are very different things.
Yeah.
I mean, the old way that, most of our records that we have in our collection are recorded when the band comes in and they set up and they record, and maybe they finish the record in a day or 2 weeks. And then as the decades rolled on and budgets got bigger and people got more gnarly about wanting to be perfect, and the advent of digital technology, and everything has to be totally precise. And I think that if you recorded a song where you built it up track by track, versus if you set the whole band up and recorded, there's going to be a whole different. There's just going to be they're going to be totally different. Especially if you're recording to a medium where you don't have the liberty of recording 1,000 takes if you're recording on tape, as it were in the past. People have this mindset where they know that, the tape is rolling and there's a finite amount of it and they paid for it and it's fucking expensive. And, and it's like, okay, we're rolling, and people have to, you got to be on your game. Everybody.
Absolutely.
If you fuck up,
Yeah. I absolutely.
You're going to trash the whole, and there's,
In some, just to be clear, you're riffing. I love this stuff, but in some ways, it's similar to, Dennis Coffey and Motown. There was still expectations that you would go into the studio, and within an hour, maybe it was 3 hours. Yeah, maybe within 3 hours, you really needed to have a song done. I think things were, I wonder about, you could theoretically do stereo recording. I think that's the head stuff, but it's just monumentally, you just would never make any profit off being a producer if you did it that way. Is that what you're saying?
You mean recording? What do you mean?
Yeah, what I mean, you also
just live.
Well, exactly, no ability,
and
just being naked in the mirror, no Pro Tools. I guess just doing the old style of recording that used to be done. Is that just not something that is?
Well, I think it just depends on who's in the room. You put on Kind of Blue, that record is. I'm not saying for sure. I don't know exactly. I know there's people out there that know exactly how that was done, but I'm assuming that it was recorded to 2-track. Maybe it was recorded to multi-track, but still, those guys cut that stuff. The players and the bar was so high. These guys.
It's true. It's true. They had it, but it's interesting the way you.
We've invented a technology that where you don't really need to know what you're doing. We'll make you sound like you know what you're doing. So then the bar drops, and then you have this,
man. How do you?
Avalanche of mediocrity and.
Right, and that's also the other thing is that obviously you have. You used Jerry Wexler or Creed Taylor or the Cats at Blue Note or whatever. Nothing was going to get released unless it met a certain bar. Things that were released on vinyl back in the day or cassette, they were worthy of recording. And now you have a situation where we're saturated with mediocre material. And I think that it's hard for, I guess you can just riff on this. How did you talk to the audience around the world about yourself, how you learned to seek out music that made you feel good? Because I think that, my daughters, their ears are wide open because I'm playing them Hampton Hawes and and I'm playing them Gospel Beach and all this stuff, and they love this stuff. But a lot of people have had digital beats crunched into their ears for the last 2 decades, and they can't really detect authenticity, especially rhythmically. So how did you go about it?
Pleasure is so subjective. Somebody can, get off listening to, something that could make the person standing next to them, gag. Taste is just. Yeah, I dig. No, but I dig what you're saying. I'm with you. But I don't know.
No, how did you? But as a kid growing up, what appealed to you? How did you learn to feel the music?
What appealed to me, man? I don't know. When I was in high school, I can't remember. I think I took the Rubber Soul record out of my dad. My parents had a pretty lousy record collection,
You're right. A lot of classical, or just like a lot.
It was like Annie soundtrack and lots of soundtracks.
Yeah, so weak.
Anne Murray and just John Denver. I couldn't get into it.
Fluff.
And but they had the Rubber Soul record was like crammed in there.
Yeah.
And, so pretty early on, I started listening to music that was probably a lot older than music other kids my age were listening to. Maybe not. I don't know, but. I don't know. You hear something and it either it turns you on or it doesn't turn you on. And when I first heard Jimi Hendrix, I remember being scared. I just remember it made me feel weird, like it wasn't a good weird or it was uncomfortable. I remember thinking it was like, it was just noise. It's just really really strange thinking about that. But then, it clicks inside of you. And, that weird, uncomfortable feeling instantly turns into something that you're obsessed with.
How did it? That's so interesting. I mean, was it just the tone and the raging inferno of sequencing of ideas from Jimmy, or I mean, like, was that sort of almost just floored you? And
I don't know. I mean, I think at the time I was a radio kid. I remember my parents had a little baby blue Volkswagen Rabbit, and I think I was like maybe 6, 7.
Wow.
I'd go out into the driveway on Saturday mornings, and you didn't need the key to turn the radio on. You just turn the radio on. I'd fall asleep in the car listening to the radio.
Mm-hmm.
But like the radio, your whatever was top 40 at the time. I remember Steve Miller, Abracadabra, and all this stuff, and Jay Giles Band, and all this shit. So that and then you have this Hendrix, which is kind of like it's hi-fi recording, but it kind of sounds lo-fi and kind of fucked up, but it's just
it's so acidic and psychedelic,
yeah, it's just not radio music. It just sounds hard and weird and edgy, and this it's just a fuzz guitar crackling, and I didn't know what it was compared to this like milquetoast shit on the radio on Saturday mornings.
You're saying, but I mean, you're saying that, like, yeah. So that was, I mean, maybe going back. I mean, I've done 4 interviews with Keltner, and I've talked to Densmore, and but do you recognize now, or did you recognize then that Ringo? I mean, a lot of people just get hung up on like his technique because it's so him. But did you recognize that, like, that Rubber Soul record? Like, it was really the rhythm that was so magical, because he was really the most individual sort of, he clearly could care less about, demonstrating monster chops or, bashing all over the place. Like, he really played the song. Did you, did that only come in hindsight, or is that why?
It did. I did not appreciate Ringo for quite many years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I became very quickly, a Beatle fanatic, like, half of the globe, I never really paid attention to him until, later, and start playing in bands, and then you start meeting drummers and, talking about references, and everybody talks about Jim Gordon and Keltner and all that stuff. And then you start listening to the Beatle records at that time, because it's just not always, it's just like an endless rotation of those records throughout your life. And then one day you listen and you're like, oh man, that fill is amazing, and what's that? And, it's like, oh, actually that was Paul playing that. Well, okay, well no, this song is really amazing. I mean, you learn the appreciation. Sometimes it doesn't hit you right in the face at the time.
Well, I mean, I reached out to Jason Soda this morning. I was like, yo, you want to come on my radio show? He's like, what kind of show is it, man? And I'm like, all right, this is so sick. And so we have a game on this program called Name That Voice, and I don't expect you to know who this is, but I did this interview back in 2011. That's how long I've been in the wilderness, cutting my way out with a machete, looking for truth from the cats. And if I could epitomize what my show is about, it would be in this one riff by this cat. So take a listen to this, come back and break it down.
Okay.
That no matter what happens, world-wise, or whatever however you want to, say it or call it. What we are as people, what we are as humans, never really changes. I mean, we all have a heart. We all come from the spirit. I think what happens is over a period of time or through culture and the cultural erosion and whatever you want to call it, our spirits and our souls get covered with a lot of complexity and a lot of garbage. That what we are as people, what we are as humans, what we are as beings gets covered with a lot of trash. But what we are, in essence, is always there, because it has to be there, because that's what we are. So, when something comes along, like something beautiful or something energetic or something that's inspiring, it rekindles that natural essence that's in all of us. And that's why you see different things happen at different times, because people are made of love. People are made of hope. And if there's an opportunity for something that shows up that illustrates that, then it plugs that energy into people again. So even though things look dark, or even though things look manipulated and whatever you want to call it right now, there's a lot of terminology. What we are is infinite. What we are is always there.
Jason, so do you want to take a guess at who that is?
Man, I can't name that voice.
I did. Don't worry about it.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, no, that was, like I said, from 10 years ago. It was my interview with a really great, he's well known in the, as a studio shark, multi-reed player, but played with Cannonball and was a serious jazz cat and badass, Ernie Watts. He did Chariots of Fire sound. Really, and I wanted you to talk about that magic, that a time in your career, especially when you were playing more live, road dogging it, when that natural essence came back, or you found people that plugged you back into the spirit, because that's what this whole game is about. Especially now that, go ahead.
I think if you're lucky enough to surround yourself with people that trust you and that you trust, and that you can have a common spark that inspires the unit, that's the best case scenario. It was really interesting what he had to say. If you could strip all your day-to-day crap off and, how you were affected by this and affected by that and thinking about this and thinking about that, and get down to, your, true inspiration. I know that being a musician, you go in and out of wanting to prove something. And I think that when you get lucky enough to have something inspire you and motivate you, and, it's going to give you that push. You can feel it in you, and hopefully you can hit that mark and satisfy whatever, internal desire you have, that you want to materialize into something. But playing in a group, they're certainly not all created equal. And if you can have those people that are playing beside you who, can telepathically tell you, like, dude, you can do whatever you want to do. Like, I want you to do whatever you want to do. That's a luxury and a privilege, that you don't always get all the time. I think all the great acts and bands and instrumentalists and soloists and ensembles, they had to have had that as like the hot core is an undeniable want for their partner to be inspired and push themselves into transcendence, with music. I mean, that's what it's all about. That's why, speaking in tongues and people freaking out and, rolling around on the floor and slamming and mosh pits and
Absolutely.
and people with their sitting Indian style with their hands on their knees.
They're just letting the body dance in whatever way, shape, or form. It's a liberation. It's a healing thing. I mean, can you personalize? Yeah. I mean, what you just riffed on Can you personalize what you just talked about in your own career?
Oh, I mean, well, I don't know. I mean,
I'm talking about like telepathy and trust on the bandstand. Can you talk about a time with a band when you were able to access what you've just been? We don't deal in platitudes on the Jake Feinberg show. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it starts in the first band that you really cut your teeth in. I mean, many years ago, being in a little shitty 3-piece out in the desert, there was just some magic. You're with your buddies and they don't want to be anywhere else and they trust you. And, you listen back, to those recordings and, some of them are pretty dreadful and some of them are pretty amazing, but, nobody's judging anybody. And, the Gospel Beach Band and Everest Band and Miranda Lee Richards Band and all these different bands, they all had this common, I think that they all trust each other. And that's what you want. I mean, that's the only way that you're really going to be able to go someplace that you haven't been before, is if everybody is like, it's unspoken, And sometimes you want to, go through the motions and satisfy what you need to do in order to, get off the stage in certain circumstances. But, if you're lucky, you can really do it, and it's all about pleasing yourself, I think, really, in a sort of selfish way. I mean, music is something that you perform for other people, but, there's a reason why you wanted to do it to begin with. You were in your room cutting your teeth on whatever, and playing all hours of the night, by yourself, because you're pushing yourself and trying to achieve something that is strange and mysterious to you, But I mean, hopefully, that's the goal.
No, I mean, did you meet Brent Rademacher at the Lost Night?
I met Brent through a friend who was playing bass with him in the early incarnation of Gospel Beach, and I had told my buddy, I said, "Hey, man, He's like, "Oh yeah, I'm in this band. It's cool, And I said, "Hey, if you need another guitar player, let me know." And he says, "Well, we've got Neil Casal playing with us right now, so we're all right." And I was like, "All right." So then I hit up Brent and I said, "Hey, man," and I've never even met him. I said, "Hey, dude, if you need a guitar player, Neil's busy touring with Robinson Brotherhood and all this other, he's a very busy man."
He was a very busy man.
He's like, "Neil's not around all the time, so we need him, he'll come in when he can come in." And so that was nice. Got to work with him a little bit, but I just basically cold called Brent and said, but I mean, I guess my question is, how did you get hip to Gospel Beach to begin? Did you see them, or how were you even hip to them? No, it was just the guy who was playing bass, this guy named Kip, was playing bass with him, and we were just chatting and talking, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm playing in this band," and I had never even heard the music.
Wow, so you just were like, "I'm horny to play in a band." You were just like, it was just random. Like, it was so random.
It was totally random.
Holy cow, man!
But I knew who Brent was, and he had he got around, and I knew.
Wait, did you know Darren? I mean, can you just? I'm just trying to. I'm really interested also in this, like, the regional hotbeds of music, from before I was birthed, but also like, this idea of like The Lost Night and all this like eclectic, it brought together all these freaking weirdos. It was such a beautiful thing in my mind. And I'm just like trying to figure out when you kind of, if you were always immersed in that scene, or how did you even get into that?
I mean, that scene really, I don't think that I had really been involved in that sort of quote unquote scene. I mean,
Yeah, whatever scene that is. I'm not sure, whatever.
The scene just kind of became, the scene just kind of became whoever you could get on the bill, and be it, if it was like a Farmer Dave sort of situation.
Oh man, I mean, dude, it was just it was a 24-man roster.
Yeah, or like, Mapache. I remember we saw those kids play there, and
I mean, they were just still in diapers or something,
Totally. I think they just stopped wearing them recently. But
wait, so I mean, like you were like Kip, you respected where you were like, I want to be in a band. I mean, I love that you didn't even know the music, totally. Man. I love this stuff.
I mean, sometimes you just have to like put yourself out there.
Absolutely.
And, you can't audition everything. You just have to just have to trust the situations. Hey, it could have been horrible, but it's always okay to sacrifice a day and go into a garage or go into a practice space or a studio and play with some people. And if it works out, great. And if it doesn't, then it's just Tuesday. I mean, I'm sure that everybody's played with people that there was only one time. It's like, I'm not gonna go back in.
But here's the thing, Jason. As better than me or anybody that, you do have to like the people you're playing with. I mean, there's a certain aesthetic to the characters. Maybe there are plenty of people that in the studio sometimes back in the day where, they'd go in and they added absolutely nothing to the session. They played their solo and went home. They didn't make any friends that way. But when you're in a band, I mean, do you feel like you had you already been stretching out improvisationally prior to Gospel Beach? How did you learn to improvise?
That's an interesting question, only in that I remember many years ago when I moved to Silver Lake, I had cut my teeth listening to Clapton and Hendrix, and that's all I cared about. That's all I wanted to do was just play, just ad-lib ad nauseum, guitar, licks and solos.
Yeah, that's so Jim Gordon, Eric Clapton, right? I love that stuff.
I mean, as soon as I moved to Silver Lake, I mean, this is like 97, 98. I mean, indie music was king.
And dude, Silver Lake must have been the hippest place at that time, man.
It kind of was, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. It's still kind of hip. Yeah. Go ahead.
Kurt Cobain had killed the electric guitar as far as solos are concerned. And,
I did.
Clapton had ruined the Stratocaster in his later years, so you couldn't play a Strat. You couldn't play any guitar solos. And then I started playing in these indie bands where it was an Americana sort of gospel type of situation.
Right.
Really great at the time, but yeah, I didn't start really getting into improvisational music until Gospel Beach. I mean, it was definitely a looser sort of setup. I mean, the Everest band was there were moments where you could take a solo or get.
But that was kind of more of a Formula Trip band, you'd say.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
The songs had nothing. The song never went over 5 minutes. Rarely. And getting back into improvisational music, I mean, talk about the trust card. I mean, people just have the whole band has to be into it.
Oh man, this is so.
And a certain kind of there has to be a certain kind of music that. It has to be a certain kind of music, to be, to allow something like that inside. So, I definitely learned a lot being in Gospel Beach. It was a totally different crew, and it was a different kind of music, and Brent with his, had references that, he was a little older than I am, so his references were of a generation where I wasn't familiar with a lot of that music, to tell you the truth, you know, and
What are you talking
so
about? Like, I mean,
he
you're talking about
opened
like
my eyes to a lot of stuff.
what? Like, was it more the psychedelic folk kind of stuff, or even because I mean,
What do you mean, reference-wise?
yeah, because like him and his bro, like I mean, their dad was a ferocious B3 Hammond B3 player in jazz. So I mean, they were going to see, freaking Maynard Ferguson, but he wasn't doing jazz references. He was hipping you more to like early folk rock, you'd say.
Well, just like, the just obscure ass stuff that, it's
Can you give an example?
obscure shit that I'd never even heard.
Yeah.
Well, I had never heard of Julian Cope before.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm still getting hip to this stuff. Yeah, I mean,
I still don't. I couldn't tell you one lyric or tell you one
Right.
song, but he would talk about Julian Cope a lot, and he'd talk about, oh man, I can't even, like, they were so strange to me. I can't even tell you now what they are. But it's
no,
kinda
it's
nice
so.
when
But I
you
mean, it's
have-
cool
you
because
have-
it's totally refreshing because it's so sub pop. Pardon the pun.
you have these cross pollination
Absolutely.
of tastes where you have this guy who enjoys this kind of music like this, and then you have this guy who enjoys this, and maybe the circles cross over a little bit, so you have like these common influences, but there's so much more influence from areas that you're not hip to, that I think that's when you start getting into stuff that starts sounding interesting and different, is when the influences get really like a cornucopia, if you will.
Yeah, it's a whole blending of color. It's music is a meal. I remember Ndugu Chancellor, the late great drummer, told me. He's like, you just can't eat chicken. You got to have rice and bean. I mean, it's a whole gumbo, right? I mean, that's just what music's about. We have,
Totally.
Jason, we got one more voice for you. I want you to take a listen to the content, and we'll come back.
All right.
Well, I mean, I ended up, going into rehab, and I had to, move out of New York. And, I had been playing, under the influence for so long that I wasn't sure what was going to happen, but, because of when I finally did get, go back and play, I mean, I have good friends in the business, and being able to go back to music, straight, and still, and love playing, and be in the same situations with people and not use anymore. I mean, it was good, man. It was great to have that. I could have lost it all, and I didn't. And so, being able to come back to music, looking back on it, helped save my life. Drugs, I don't think they make you play better, but they can ease whatever pain you're going through to help you be able to concentrate on something that makes you feel good.
Jason Soto, you want to take a guess at that?
Oh man, I couldn't even begin to guess.
It's
that.
all right. No, it's hard through the phone. That was my first interview from August 2014 with Steve Gadd.
Oh,
And
wow.
he went there with me. I asked him, the question that I led in with was, can you talk about a time in your career when you faced a lot of adversity and how you overcame it and how it made you stronger? And he could have given me some lame-ass answer, but he went right to this. I don't know. Do you know his story?
I mean,
I know you
he's
know who he
pretty,
is. Yeah, I mean, he was
pretty
like,
renowned for
yeah.
being into it.
He was, here's the point. He could have lost everything. He had to go away. He was involved he had young kids. He couldn't see them.
Wow.
And this is a guy who, was so hooked. You know, Al Di Meola would bring him in for like that Elegant Gypsy session, late '70s fusion, and like they'd have to wake him up, and they'd stick this like very complex, like three-part suite on the stand. They'd wake him up, he'd burn through it in one take, and then nod off again. He was really out. So my point is this: I just want you to talk to your peers and elders. I mean, like you said, Rademacher is a generation older, but for people that don't have the tenacity or the chops to have production chops, and they are road dogs all the way through and through. And can you talk about how you can look towards the light and how you can stay upbeat? Because I worry a lot. I don't worry about it right this minute, but I do, because I'm not a prophet, but I do see, as we go back to the beginning of the interview, a fundamental shift in how art is going to be viewed now by the public. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about how you stay buoyant in these times.
Man, I think it's a daily struggle.
Right.
I mean, it's not pretty out there. Everybody says, "Oh, the world's such a beautiful world." Man,
not right now.
You got to clear out.
Yeah.
You got to clear out a bunch of shit out of your eyesight before you can see that beauty.
Wow.
Sometimes, it's. And as far as getting wrapped up, in drugs and alcohol or whatever, I've seen times where that has, maybe helped the situation, or, it's harmless or this or that. But I've seen some failings on stage where, it's not doing any of us any favors. But people who get stuck in that rut, they're in it. They can't see it. Only the people on the outside can see, and they'll only have hindsight later. Maybe they might know or be embarrassed that they're acting like a shit or whatever, or out of control, but, people can only really help themselves at the end of the day, but being positive and trying to get through the negativities of that happen every day. Dude, that's hard to do. We all have our days when we wake up and you're just not good from the get-go.
Right.
And then there are days that you wake up and, for me, usually, honestly, I feel like a good day is equated to being inspired by something, but dealing with the stresses of every day, it's hard to manage. I think a lot of us, we're pretty surprised at Neil Casal's passing. Maybe people who knew him really well might have said different or something, but it's who knows what the person standing next to you is going through.
It's interesting. It's interesting you brought it up, because I hung with him on the last Brotherhood tour in New York. It was Long Island, New York. Last summer, and he was like kind of jumpy. He was kind of jumping out of his skin a little bit. He didn't look really comfortable in his own being. He's playing okay, and we had actually a great dinner. It was fun. It was like we were just getting. We weren't super tight by any means. We were just friends, and he loved me, and
Sure.
He was a good cat. And then I was up at this monastic Buddhist farm in Prescott, Arizona, just working for my share with my dear spirit brother, Will Duncan. And my first book, which I'll send you a link to, I realized, I said, it's only the graybeards in this book, guys like Gad and Keltner and Danny Korchmar and these guys, these guys I've interviewed. I said, I don't have any of my peers. And, Neil's like 10 years older than me, but I reached out to him and I said, it was like late June or something like that. And I said, hey man, we did 2 radio interviews and here's the content and I want to use it for my first book. So, if you're cool with it, let me know. and he was like stoked, man, stoked. And so he couldn't figure out how to electronically, he couldn't figure out the electronic waiver form. So he had to snail mail me the permission form and or the waiver release, and I got it, and then 10 days later he's gone.
Wow.
And it really was like, and I talked to some people that knew him just as friends, and just literally like going back for a while, and they said they were surprised but not shocked, because they had seen him in some dark places. But he's always in my thoughts, and sometimes going back and watching stuff, and but that's what I worry about, is that the sensitivity of musicians and the giving, the constant giving. I just worry that the longer this goes on, and the more that it's mangled and botched by the federal government, it's just going to be harder and harder to. I mean, you can see sports is going to try to bowl through it, but I think it's going to be a disaster, and I think there's going to be tragedy involved, and I think it's stupid. But that's $1 billion industry, and musicians, they haven't always. They were once respected and looked at as a profession in our culture, but I don't know anymore, and I worry about my peers and people, anybody, just because they can't get stuff out of their system live, and that has nothing to do with Neely. Neely's situation is deeper than that, but he was seriously dealing with a lot of depression, so that's what is more sinister to me. And I just, and you said, go ahead.
Making the choice to be a musician and to devote your life to playing music or working on music, or and to choose to not go to school or
right.
do all these more conventional sort of reputable professions or whatever.
Whatever that means.
It's not always the best choice. I mean, I've thought a million times, like maybe not a million, but a lot of times, if I had kids, I hey man, just be careful that you if you're going to make that choice, you better. I mean, you're not going to know until later. I mean, it's an uphill battle the whole time. But you just have to try to know that it's hard, and and that you're probably not going to make a lot of money. And, if you can, try to continue to make yourself happy doing the thing that made you happy a long time ago. And, I think you have to work on it. I really do. I think you have to remind yourself of these things. Kind of, you have. I mean, I don't meditate all the time. My wife does a lot of meditating, and she wants me to do it with her all the time. And sometimes I do it, and sometimes I don't. But man, I tell you, everybody probably needs to do it.
I mean, that to me, man, I know. Believe me, it's a discipline, and McLaughlin has told me on our interviews, Johnny McLaughlin, discipline is the gateway to freedom. That is a guy who got off of hard drugs through yoga, and I know it's really hard to do it solo, but man, if you really enjoy if you really dig your significant other, I would be completely doing that all the time. I know sometimes you don't want to, I just, to me, it's like solo wise now, I mean, after, like there was love in my marriage and we have these loved children, but after 13 years, it wasn't. And, but right now, because there's no, for musicians, playing music live is meditation, but you don't have that opportunity right now. So,
totally.
Somehow I just think that's, you got a great thing going on, whether you know it or you got to be doing that all the time, man.
True. Absolutely.
I mean, whatever. I mean, try to do it as much as you can, because, it's hard solo, but man, if I had somebody who, any kind of like, spouse or whatever, like, I mean, if they were encouraging me to do it at this particular time, yeah, I mean, that's important because I know how hard it is just to consistently, what's interesting is that you move around a lot as a musician. I mean, as far as on the bandstand, you're very energetic, and you know, like in the Bible, David danced. I mean, meditation is dancing. Sufi, it's all dance, you know, in a lot of ways. But, you know,
Sure.
the sedentary meditation is very hard for people like me. You know, it's just like, it's hard.
Difficult.
Yeah, I'd rather play conga drums to Cal Jader records, you know. I mean, it's just, I mean, I get off more on that than anything else, you know.
And hey, there's nothing, you know, that's
Exactly.
it's
There's no
all-
judgment. No, I dig. Yeah.
you know, it's the same kind of thing.
Well,
Whatever it is
yeah.
that makes that gland like open up, you know, whatever it is, it's the same. Whether you're beating a drum or you're sitting there, you know, trying to clear your mind of any thoughts. I mean, you know, it's the same thing, isn't it?
Well, Jason Soda, we're just this is just set one, man. Let's plan on doing a set two in the near future. Really a high honor to connect with you, man. And also, I mean, you're just getting hip to my thing, but actually, with a lot of my peers, people look at it and they say, "You said it. Why me?" And that doesn't come up. I mean, I think a lot of people after the interview are like, "Oh my God, that was pure inspiration. How inspiring!" so if that's the entire the reason I played that Ernie Watts quote was because that is my show. It is about plugging in inspiration to keep people upbeat, man. So I appreciate you going there with me. I hope it was inspiring for you, and it was great to connect with you, brother.
Likewise, I'm honored that you had me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, it was a great time. We'll do it again.
Okay, great.
All right, be cool, man.
Thanks, Jake.
Yeah, man. Peace.
Later.
Yeah. One down, one to go. We'll be back at the top of the hour on the Jake Feinberg Show.